All right. Hello, everybody. How we all do? Excuse me. Apologies for that, folks. Let me just take a quick look here. Just give me 1 second. Just having a little bit of a glitch with getting the chat. I'll be back in a minute. Oh, there we go. Finally came up. All right. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Just was looking for the chat. Welcome to night number 2 of the Advanced Passage Planning for BC Water Seminar. Somebody can just give me a thumbs up and just let me know that you can hear me okay and that everything's coming through all right. And then we can continue getting on. Feel free to type into the chat in the comment section where you're connecting in from, just to sort of let us know where we've got everybody joining us from tonight. And then we'll be getting all set and squared away. So last week, we took a look at a number of different things with regards to our sort of preliminary planning, what sort of documents we needed, what sort of resources we needed, and everything from that side. This week, we're going to continue a little bit along that discussion and start to take a look at bringing the information in about incorporating the electronic tools and resources into our planning and bringing all of those elements in and just sort of fleshing things out a little bit, as well as we're going to start taking a look at some of the key elements, the different types of planning tools that are available from an electronic perspective, looking at a couple of key ones that you have. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on talking about Garmin boating and Orca. And then next week, we're going to be taking a look at Aquamaps, Savvy Navvy, and a couple of other apps that are really sort of indispensable in my utilization. Things like Predict Current and Predict Wind, being a sailor. Those are very important apps that we've got as far as Windy and other tools that we've got as well. Now, one of the things that's really going to be a key part here is we are not going to be going into any one of these apps during the live stream and going into a significant amount of detail. We will be showing you some of the key things about them. We have on the website for this course posted links to playlists that have tutorials on all of these different apps, as well as I will be getting around to creating some additional tutorials specifically for this course and bringing that information together. And so, as we're sort of taking a look at it, the main thing of what we want to do is to sort of emphasize some of the generic aspects about how we go about putting the planning and the electronic tools together, and some of the key concepts that are going to work with all of the different apps that you may be utilizing. But our main focus, by showing you a number of different apps that we've got, is to really help you sort of take a look and say, well, why might I choose app X over XY? Why might I want to use Savvy Navvy or Orca versus Navionics or Garmin boating? What might be my decision to make a choice to choose one or the other, and to really help you feel a little bit more comfortable with that, because they're all going to come at a little bit of a cost, some more than others, and we're going to talk about that cost difference as we sort of work our way through the session this evening as we go. So let's just give me a little bit of a moment here just to go. We're going to be a little bit with different things hooked up because we're going to be using the apps themselves tonight and taking a look at things. So let's take a look at where we're going to go with the slides this evening as we're taking a look at the advanced passage planning for BC waters. So I guess one of the first things before we get too far down is, does anybody have any questions sort of left over from last week? If you do, just sort of type them into the comment section and feel free to use the letter Q in front. That helps me sort of find it a little bit more. There's that. We have had a couple questions. Have used Ocean Connect, which is free. There's a lot of different apps out there, and we could spend months going through and taking a look at all the different ones. There are a couple of key reasons why we use some of the paid ones, and one of the main reasons for that is to have the app updates and to make sure you're getting the updates from the maps. But also there's certain features that you may not have available that are going to be pretty valuable. Well, we'll get into questions as you're going along. So if you do have any questions, type them in as we go. As I mentioned, we will have additional video tutorials and walkthroughs on some of the different sheets and different planning tools that we're using. With the rainy weather that we've got here on the West Coast coming this week. Last week was more about getting the boat out of the water and getting it all ready to go for the season, because I didn't want to be having to deal with that this week coming up. So I was a little bit behind in creating some additional video tutorials for you, but I will hopefully be able to get to them with the extensive rain that we've got coming now that my boat's cleaned up, hull painted, back in the water, and getting the last little bits ready to go for the season as we work our way along. Now, a couple of things from last week that I just want to re-emphasize, and that is ticking about the additional electronic chart details. And this is one of the big things that there was a lot of discussions that people had that were sort of saying, well, where are we going? Well, there's a lot of confusion with this, because if you look at the CHS website, there's all sorts of discussions about the move to electronic charts and moving from raster charts to ENCs, which are electronic navigational charts. But the key thing with this is these charts are in the S57 format. S57 is not a format that can be used on recreational chart plotters. That's a format that can only be used on commercial chart plotters. We've got S57, S67, and S100 rather, which are all different standards that the International Hydrographic Organization, the IHO, sets up. It's sort of like the W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium that sets the rules that say this is how you're going to code a website, whether you're Google or Bing or any other browser out there. They all follow the same guidelines, so there's interoperational connectivity with it. What you will find is that certain platforms, such as Raymarine with their Axiom, are able to handle S67 charts, which you can purchase from a number of providers, particularly in the UK. But the ones that are talked about on the CHS website are S57, and that's designed for a commercial chart plotter, not a recreational chart plotter. Now, they have, in November of 2025, started doing sea trials in the St. Lawrence River with S100, as a universal set of guidelines and definitions for laying all of that out. And so when we think about this, this is where we get into the actual rules. And the rules where it talks about the CHS official chart products, which is the box over on the right-hand side, it says the Canadian Hydrographic Services, the S57 charts, meet the carriage requirements for Navigation Safety Regulations 2020. Now, what you see is that Part B says that manufacturers who are licensed to use CHS charts in their value-added digital products do not meet the chart carriage requirements under the navigation safety. And there's a long list of tools there such as Garmin, CMAP, Navionics, Orca, Navvy, etc. that all fall into that ballgame. And so this is where it meets the requirements for copyright. So it's letting you know that yes, the CHS charts and the elements of the CHS charts that are being used by those apps are not violating copyright, but they do not meet the requirement as far as the need to have charts under the Navigational Safety Regulations 2020. Now, there's a lot of discussions about, yeah, but if you know the water, you don't have that. And this is a subsection that says, yes, if you have a vessel that's less than 100 gross tons, and if you have sufficient knowledge of the following about where you're going to be navigated such that safety and efficiency will not be compromised. So you've got to know all of the charted shipping routes. You've got to know all of the lights, buoys, and marks. You've got to know all the navigation hazards, and you've got to know all the prevailing navigational conditions. And several comments made by the government and various resources have used the term intimate knowledge. Now, that may well apply to you if you're like just staying in your own harbor that you spend a lot of time with. But if you're doing any traveling out on the water, you're going to be going beyond that little area, and you're going to be getting into spots where it's going to be very difficult to have complete intimate knowledge in your brain of all of the lights, buoys, marks, shipping routes for that particular water area, which is why it's going to be very difficult to not have the current updated paper charts like we talked about last week on board the vessel. So there was a lot of discussion about this, and it's one of the ones that generates so many questions. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate that, as well as include the link to where that information is found on the CPS website. So with all of that, as we're moving into tonight's session, where we're taking a look at the electronic planning with Garmin, boating, and Orca, first thing we're going to do is to sort of go through the completion of step number 1, which was our preliminary planning part, and then taking a look at steps 2 and steps 3. And then we're going to be introducing a little bit about some of the basics of electronic navigational tools, and specifically look at Garmin, boating, and Orca tonight as we take a look at the others. So as we take a look, we have come a long way in navigation safety from the old days of being up in the crow's nest and having somebody just keeping an eye out for, birds, or when we might be getting into shallower waters. We're a lot better than what we used to be. Things have come a long way within that context. So let's take a look at where we were and have a little bit of a conversation about the steps. So you remember last week we talked about the 3 steps in preliminary planning. Step number 1 was having a rough plan for each day for the whole trip, and we laid sort of some of the things out. Step 2 was having a very detailed plan for each specific day, and that's where we're going to start to incorporate some of the electronic tools that we've got. And then step number 3 is your pre-departure check. And so we're going to be sort of starting off with these. Now, with all the things that are going on here on the West Coast, we've got tides, we've got currents, we are going to have different guides, whether it's ports and passes or whether it's the official Canadian government documents that there are. There may be a need to be able to understand where is the tide going to be between high and low and what time that's going to happen. So as a rule of thumb, and this is not perfect, but it's an estimation that is generally going to work pretty well. In order to calculate your intermediate tidal calculations, if there's ever a need for you to be able to do that, so determining where this might come into play is if you're trying to figure out what is the water level going in. For example, there's a couple of really great protected moorages up in Desolation Sound that you've got about 4 feet of water at low tide when you're trying to go in. So unless if you've got a sailboat, you've got to be very specific about making sure that you've got enough water over there. So obviously if it's high tide and you got at least whatever your draft is, in my case it's 6'9", then you're fine, you're good to go. But the question is, what is the range around that high tide when you're going to be able to go in? And what happens is when we take a look at the rule of 12ths, when we're talking about intermediate tidal height, in the first hour, it's going to be 1/12 of the total tidal range. So that's the range going from full flood to full ebb, or when you've got max water versus shallowest water. When you're in the second hour, it's going to be 2/12 plus 1/12 of the total range, which is going to be about 25%. At the third hour, it's going to be 3/12 plus 2/12 plus 1/12, so it's going to be 50%. The fourth hour, it's going to be 75. The fifth hour, it's going to be 91.7. And then the sixth hour, it's going to be 100. And the whole part about that is it's not going to be a linear change of tide. It's going to be flowing through, and you're going to have a bigger range at certain points as it's getting to its peak, and then it's going to start to abate back off. And that's where, as it goes through those 12 cycles, it's going 1/12, and then the next hour is going to be adding another 2/12, and then 3/12, and then 3/12, and then 2/12, and 1/12. So I always have this, but I don't worry about all the 1/12 bit. I just sort of do the percentages because that's much easier for me to sort of think about from my calculator, and realizing where let me check. My fourth hour may not be right there. I'll take, maybe my math is a little bit off. So 6, 7, 8, 9 12s. Yeah, that fourth hour is not correct on that, because that should be 9 12s. Good catch there, Tom. So whatever 9 divided by 12 is. That is 75%, isn't it? 9 12s. Let me get my calculator out here. This is what's happened. Yeah, 75%. Yeah, 9 12. And then in the fifth hour, it's going to be 91.7. Yeah, because what happens is in the third hour and the fourth hour, you've got both of those are 3/12 that are being added into the situation there. So yeah, so that is correct. It is 75. You had to be going there for a second, just trying to check and see if I'm paying attention to the questions. Now, the current calculation is one that can be a lot more important. And so this is where, when we're thinking about the speed perhaps of going through Dodd Narrows, as an example, the rule of thirds is estimating the current between slack water. And so this is where at hour 0, which is going to be slack, it's going to be 0% of whatever the maximum speed is that it's going to hit at that peak. At the end of the first hour, it's going to be 50%. At the end of the second hour, it's going to be 90. At the end of the third hour, it's going to be back to that max speed again. And then it's going to start to abate. At the end of the fourth hour, it's going to be 90%. At the end of the fifth hour, it's going to be 50%. And then at the sixth hour, it's going to be 0. And the key part here is that the greatest amount of change that you're going to be experiencing is going to be right around that first hour after or before slack. That's where you've got that greatest amount of change. That's where 50% of the maximum speed is going to be picked up in that 60 minutes. And so this is why we need to be perhaps using different tools or different ways of being able to figure out what the current is going to be for our safe passage as we're going through. So if we take a look, this is an example of ports and passes for today in Dodd Narrows. We see that Dodd Narrows, if we take a look, the max flood was going to occur at 12:28 p.m. and that was going to be 4.7 knots was what it was going to be at that point. So we see slack was at 950. So between 950 and 1050, approximately, it was going to get 50% of the max. So 50% of the 4.7. So between 950 and 1050, it was going to go up to 2.35 knots at about an hour after 950. Now, again, there's always going to be adjustments because of weather, environment, etc. So this is why these are rules of thumb and not finite, estimations of what we've got as we're taking a look at it. So if we see that slack is also 319, that's where we've got the next slack. So between 219, it's going to be 2.35. And then abating between 219 and 319 as we're going through and taking a look at that. So that's where you can get a rough idea, a rough estimate of where things are. Let me just get my iPad out here because I want to show you another tool or technique that we can take a look at. So if we go to here and let's get the iPad up. All right. So if we go into Garmin boating or Navionics, as you're probably used to saying, everybody still calls it that, even on the site. And if we go to Dodd Narrows as an example, so we're just sort of zooming in our Navionics. And as we get to where Dodd Narrows are, we're going to see that there's the arrow indicating the current. And when we tap on that, it's going to open up a little window. And if we go to the Dodd Narrows and hit the top part, let me get that here, then what you see across the bottom of your screen is you see the details from Navionics about what is happening in this place as we're going along. And Andrew, I was using ports and passes, so you don't have to add an hour because it's already adjusted for on ports and passes. You do need to adjust for daylight savings time when you're dealing with what's happening on the government documents. So if we take a look here, now on the bottom of the screen, we see that now over on the left-hand side, it's telling us that, whoops, let me go back to that again, that right now the current at Dodd is doing 5.18. But if we go back to earlier today, just simply by sliding the slider down across the bottom, we can see that slack, or that max flood, was going to be 12.35, and it was going to be 4.6 knots. And as we go down here, we can see that the slack before that was going to be sitting at around 956. It was going to be 0.5 knots. So for me, with my vessel that does 6 knots, I'm comfortable with going for or against a current of around 2 knots. 2 knots or a bit. I'm going to have full control. It's not going to be an issue or an element for me, so everything's going to work out fine. So if you just sort of use your finger to get an approximation of where that's going to be, I can just sort of slide this along until the speed on that left-hand side is around 2. And this shows me it's going to be at about 10:35 a.m. It's going to be 2.02 knots. And so that way there, it gives me my window so I can start to make my plans and say, I need to be able to hit Dodd. If we go to the next slack over here, so this slack, we're going to be sitting at around 3.323 in the afternoon for the slack. So if I go back until we get 2 knots, we can see that between about 238, which is on that bottom left-hand side, as you see, to 2 knots on the other end to 402. So that gives me my window when, for me, with my vessel, the speed that I'm capable of doing, I know that I can go through Dodd Narrows at that particular point, and with any time within that window, I'm going to be good because it's going to be less than 2 knots of current, and I'm already determined that I'm comfortable with doing that. And so that's where this piece of Navionics is very useful. But again, you can't do this planning too far in advance, because as you scroll across here, we get to the point where Thursday, we're now Monday. So it gives you about 4 days out of that information when you're dealing with a passage like Dod Narrows or any of those other locations that you can take a look at as you're working your way through. So that's one of the ways that I use that a lot, to be able to sort of incorporate those pieces to sort of bring all of that information together. And Gary, you asked that, do you need to add an hour to your time displayed in your app? It depends on the app, but generally not, because they're taking the time on the basis of your GPS location and your device. But it is always one of the things to check. And that's why I always check everything out manually as a backup to whatever's happening within the app as well. And always taking a look at more than one source to make sure that you've got the entire piece of where you're going. All right, so that's a couple of little tricks there that you've got. And yes, Tom and a couple of others have mentioned that clicking on the left, if you click on the date, you can choose a future date. So you've got a different range on the scale as you're going. Yes, that's one of the key features that it is there as well. Thank you for sharing that as we go. Now, one of the other things that we take a look at is when we take a look at step number 2, this is where we're talking about the detailed plan for each day. Now, this is where, as we're working out our path and thinking about where we're going to go, we need to consider what are the tidal considerations, what are the current considerations, where we're going to be going, what's the rough plan of our path. And this is where we bring in, using electronic tools, and bringing all of that and take a look at our compass headings and our conversions for where that information goes, and plotting out what our speed, distance, and time is going to be as we work our way along. So one of the key things that I see a lot of boats, particularly charter boats, I'm surprised, don't have compass cards on them. Now, compass cards, remember, are a plan for creating what is the deviation that you're going to have. Because when you're converting from true north to magnetic north, you use the variation. But to go from your magnetic north to the compass north, what you're going to use on your boat's compass, you need to know what the deviation is. And that's where all vessels are going to have a dedicated deviation card, or they should. And basically what it's doing is it's created by swinging the compass so that every 10 degrees of magnetic, you've got a compass reading that says, in my case, on my boat, if I'm getting a reading, if I need to go 60 degrees magnetic, then my compass is going to be 54 degrees. If I need to go on a heading of 200 magnetic, then my compass is going to be 202 degrees. Now, the differences between your magnetic and your compass from your deviation card are not going to be symmetrical, because if you think about it, on board, the whole part of having a deviation card is the fact that you've got all that electronics around your compass, other pieces of metal that may be impacting where that compass is going. And depending upon which way the magnetic north is pointing, that north is going to be impacted by different electronic fields and different elements. And so that's why you do an estimate of this every 10 degrees, because you need to sort of have this mapped out and plotted out. I didn't get a chance to put this into the preparations, but I will be putting a template up as well as an example of the one for my vessel as far as the deviation card, because this is going to be an important part when you're doing your planning, so that you know what heading you need to be going on the compass, and you don't have to be doing these plans, in an emergency along the way as you go. Now, when we do this plan out on the day, this allows us, as we're sort of progressing our way and doing our actual log as we're working our way along, to sort of have those little checkpoints and to sort of say, well, where are we? We were supposed to be here at 2:04. It's now, 2:30. We're running a little bit behind schedule. Is that going to impact anything? Do we need to try to pick up our speed? If we've been sailing and we've only been doing about 3.5 or 4 knots, do we need to go under the motor to put that together to bring things? So Tom, sorry, we just had a question from Tom that said how create the template for the compass card. I'm assuming you're meaning the compass card and not the blank sheet. There are people that will calibrate your compass and try to sort of put magnets in there. One of the easy ways to have some sort of examples, if you can go out when there's limited water movement, and limited impact of current, and get yourself going on a nice, slow, steady speed on a magnetic heading of 30 degrees. Set your GPS to read magnetic. And when it's reading 30, take a look at what your compass is saying and write that down. And then turn your boat 10 degrees. And so your GPS is showing 40 degrees, and then write that down. And it's not perfect, but for the vast majority of us that are not going to be able to necessarily hold a course within 1 degree on our binnacle compass as we're working our way along, it's a great way to just give you something that gives you that idea so that you have that. And you also need to make sure that anytime you install new electronics, anytime you change your chart plotter or you add something, you've got to sort of really make sure you do that. I was on one charter boat once that had the binnacle compass in the middle of the table. All right. Now, if any of you have ever been on a boat, a sailboat especially, and you've got a phone, where do you put your phone? On the table. And it was I actually shot a video. I might even be able to dig it up and post it. But I had clients that were chartering the boat. One of them put their phone on the table, and literally the compass swung 30 degrees because the phone was on the table within 6 inches of the compass. So that's a real important part to making sure that you're cognizant of the impact that these devices have and, what the electronic fields are creating as you're working your way through as you go. So the reason why we do all this plan in advance is that we've got an idea of where we're going and what we want to do. So let's take a look at one of the ways we go about sort of setting up this plan. Actually, we'll cover step 3 and then we'll come back and take a look at that within Navionics as far as how we go. Because two of the things that are really, really important is when you're doing your pre-departure check. So before you're getting ready to go, you need to make sure that you check the weather. And so this is where if you go to the Government of Canada and look at the marine weather site, you're going to be able to get the forecast, but more important, you're going to be able to also go and click on specific buoys, take a look at status on land, and be able to get a lot more detail as you're taking a look at that site. You can also call area code 604-664-9011. And that's going to give you a recorded message similar to what you would get on your radio on the Weather Channel. Now, here's the kicker. Strait of Georgia, south of Nanaimo, is a massively huge chunk of water. And the problem with that and the way the weather patterns are out here, there's nuances in there that are going to be pretty extreme. And it's giving you a broad base about this is what our projection is because they've got to do that. Well, there was an absolutely amazing presentation a couple of years ago by the marine meteorologists at the Canadian government. And they mentioned that they have a number, and out here in BC, you might want to make sure you write this one down or screenshot this one because this is probably the most important slide of the whole presentation tonight, that if you call 1-844-505-2525, and it's open Monday to Friday from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. and on weekends and holidays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you call that number, you will get directly to a marine meteorologist, and you can say, hey, I'm going to be running from Nanaimo over to Secret Harbor today. It looks like, according to the forecast, that things are going to be not so great. Well, they'll take a look at their little nuances of the weather patterns and take a look at what their more advanced details say and go, well, if you head south towards Vancouver until you get to this latitude and longitude and then swing north, you'll miss this particular front that's got us concerned. And so that's a free service that's available, and it gets you directly. They have another number for people that are going hiking to get you a land meteorologist to give you those specific details. But particularly when we think about the broad range that those, Strait of Georgia, Nanaimo North or Strait of Georgia, Nanaimo South, that's a big chunk of water. And there's so many micro nuances in there. Those you can find out when you talk to them. And yeah, they do love to talk to people. I've never had a grumpy person when I've called, and it is one of the most amazing resources that we have available to do a quick double check. Now, if it's beautiful weather and everything's forecast to be good, I'm not going to call them up and bother them. But it's when there's warnings or whether there's issues that are sort of coming through. This is where I want to check to see if I need to go somewhere, where do I go? What's the best pathway I should be taking as we work our way through? There's also a number of telephones that you can call and weather radio frequencies for different areas. And I will post that sheet on the website as well. I've been in meetings all day today, back to back to back. So I was a little bit delayed in getting the handouts up on the website and didn't quite get all the links up there that I wanted to, but I will address those tomorrow. So we'll get there. So yeah, just make sure you record that number of talking to the marine meteorologist, because particularly when there's warnings out, that is the best way to sort of find out, is there a particular path or a particular area that you need to avoid with where you're going. Now, the second big pre-departure check that you want to do is to make sure that your radio is working. Now, I'm going to take advantage of this part to do a plug for the DSC VHF radio. And this is super duper important. I don't even think you can buy a VHF radio these days that is not DSC. DSC stands for Digital Selective Calling. Now, what that means is that that radio is assigned a unique 9-digit number to the vessel or the station that belongs to the vessel, and it is programmed into the radio. What that means is that you can call a DSC radio just by simply dialing the number, saying what channel you want to go to, the working channel, and all of a sudden your phone rings or your radio rings. So you don't have to hail somebody on channel 16 and clog up what should be the emergency channel. It allows you to be using the DSC to call directly and move everybody over. Now, there's two numbers that you can have. If you've got a shore-based radio, or if you've got a boat-based radio, you will have a MMSI number, a Maritime Mobile Service Identity. If you've got a handheld radio, that handheld radio will, when you go to register it, they'll give you two options by registering it to the boat as well and sharing the MMSI number, something I highly recommend not to do, or to get its own identity and its own MI number. Which is for handhelds. I would highly recommend making sure that your handheld radio has its own dedicated MI number for a number of reasons. If I'm on my boat, then that's great because everything's fine. But if I'm on a charter boat or I'm traveling someplace else, my MI number is going to be absolutely key. And that way there, I have my own separate communication. It's also great when I'm out on a cruise with the family or with clients or whatever, and they want to go to the beach or go somewhere, and I can take them to shore. And as we get them there, I can drop them off. I give them the handheld radio. Within the handheld radio, the boat's number is there. So when they're ready to be picked up, they can just call the boat, or I can call them at any time and they can say, hey, you're ready to be picked up. And where we go, and everything's done. And we've stayed off of channel 16. So channel 16 is set specifically for emergencies. The more we can stay off that, the better off it's going to be. Now, you get your MMSI number or your MI number from ISED, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. You can just search for the MMSI or MI Applications Canada online. And Canadian vessels will always begin with a 316. If it's a group calling section, it'll be 0316. So you can get group MMSI numbers. So for example, a yacht club may get a group MMSI number and have that as well. Shore stations are going to be 00316. The advantage of that is when you go and you dial that 0316 and then the number, everybody who's got that number programmed into their radio will get the warble. So say as an example, you're a member of CanBoat Nanaimo, which has its own dedicated group MMSI number, and you're up at Desolation Sound and you're by yourself and you're a little bit lonely and you're like, I'd like to have a sundowner, but I don't want to, have it by myself. You can place a group call to that, and anybody who's within the area that goes is going to get a warbling on their phone, and you may find out that they're just around the corner and they want to get together for drinks. So it allows you within the range of the VHF to be able to find somebody that's there. Now the MI numbers are going to be 8316. So that's the only difference between the MMSI numbers and the MI numbers. So, if you're ever looking for me out on the water this summer, the vessel's name is Latitude Attitude, and its MMSI number, as you can see there, is 316-011-031. Call sign is Charlie Foxtrot Alpha 3690, and my personal MI number for my handheld radio is, remember, 8, and then the 316-04212. So you've always got those, so call me. If you see me out on the water or where you go, reach out and let me know. Now, while we're on that, just one quick thing, because we were talking about Dodd Narrows, and it's one of the very, very annoying things. And that's talking just briefly about security calls. The purpose of a security call is to make it when there's a potential for impeding traffic if we're dealing with going through a passage, as an example. Dodd Narrows is not that narrow. Unless you are towing something, have logs, or have a massively huge trimaran, 2 boats are going to be able to pass through Dodd Narrows. So please do not give a security call and let people know that you're going through Dodd Narrows. There's no need. If there's another boat coming the other way, you pass side by side. It's different if you're going into Malibu Rapids out at Princess Louisa. That is a 1-lane traffic and it's an S-turn, so you can't see somebody coming. You do need to give a security call there. The other piece on the security calls, don't do them at full power, because the whole purpose of security call is to alert people about something in their area. Crank the power down to your low power setting when you give that security call. I have heard people calling security at Dodd Narrows when I'm down in Salt Spring Island. All right. That's a little bit ridiculous. So just a little bit of a personal pet peeve. Constantly hearing so many people, security, this vessel going through Dodd Narrows. You don't need to do that. Please don't do that. It's a 2-lane traffic. Security calls are not needed in that. If you're towing a barge of logs, oh yeah, security call is absolutely merited. Generally not. Now, you always want to check your radio, and you want to check your DSC part of the radio as well. All right. Next news flash, never, ever press that button, on the emergency to test your DSC radio. The best way to test your DSC radio is to call your handheld's MI number from your landline, or the alternative is when you do your radio check with the Victoria Coast Guard radio. And again, here's another bit. Don't do radio checks on channel 16. Channel 16 is not for radio checks. And if I had $1 for every time somebody called Victoria Coast Guard radio on channel 16 for a radio check, and they've got to have the patience of, I don't know what, but they always sort of tell you they'll do the radio check, but then they'll advise you that radio checks are done on channel 83 Alpha. All right. Do not call Victoria Coast Guard radio on channel 16 unless it's an emergency. You can reach them at 83 Alpha to check your regular radio. And you can also reach them through DSC at 00316 0011. And that will get you to Victoria Coast Guard radio through the DSC. So that's another alternative for checking that your DSC is working, is literally making a DSC call that is a non-emergency call. The other option, which is one we use here in Nanaimo a lot, is whether you're going to be going north or not, call with Chelsea Control, which manages Whiskey Gulf, which is the military range that's out in the water that you have to monitor to make sure you're not going in it if it's active that day. So you can call them on channel 10, find out whether the area is active, and they'll come back and let you know, and then all is good. There's also channels where they broadcast you can monitor, but if you're reaching out to them, they have a DSC number as well, and their DSC number is 0031 60184. So that's a great way to always check your handheld radio, check your boat-based radio to make sure that everything's working. You also want to check all of your emergency equipment, make sure everything's good. Again, not activating any of your emergency gear. And the three key pieces that I just want to sort of mention briefly here are the EPIRB, the PLB, and the MOB, because sometimes there's a little bit of confusion between what each one of these is all about. The EPIRB is your emergency position indicating radio beacon. That is your vessel's emergency device. So sometimes you'll see these mounted outside of a boat in a clip. I have mine in my go bag, which if I need to abandon ship, that bag's got my backup radios, backup food supply, backup water supply, backup compass, all the bits and pieces, signaling devices. If I'm leaving the boat for whatever reason, that bag is going with me, and it's got my EPIRB in a little storage pouch on the side of that bag. A personal locator beacon, or a PLB, uses satellite positioning and will send an emergency signal. And there's a variety of different types that you've got. You see the ones on the top right, or on the top right side, or on the far right. These are going to, when they're activated, they will send a signal to the Coast Guard and let them know that, hey, in this case, it's registered to an individual, not to a boat, because it's a personal locator beacon. So if my EPIRB goes off, then the Coast Guard knows that Latitude Attitude is in trouble at this exact GPS location. If my PLB gets activated, they know that Lyle is in trouble at this exact GPS location. The key of all of that is taking search and rescue and removing the whole search part so that it's just rescue. They don't have to search if they know where the heck you are. And that's where having a personal locator beacon is, for a couple of $100, having one of those for each person on board is absolutely key. Now, an MOB device, like you see the little wristwatch unit that's there, it uses AIS and or digital selective calling for close responses. So it'll only work within VHF range. All right, so it is limited. It's not going to do satellite to be able to communicate, which a PLB does. Now, after a couple of years of waiting, last year, I think it was last year when it finally got done, we finally got the best of both worlds. This device has been out for a while in the States, but it needed to get CRTC clearance because of the radio frequency stuff. And there's two main types, and you'll see them in the pictures there, and you may go, wow, they look pretty much identical. It's because they're probably made in the same factory, just packaged differently. And that is ACR's Rescue Link AIS PLB or Ocean Signal Rescue Me PLB 3. This has got the best of everything. It's got the whole satellite signal going to the Coast Guard just like your PLB has, but it also has AIS functionality and return link service. So what this means is if you go overboard, anybody whose chart has an AIS receiver on it, or if they've got an AIS receiver on their boat, it's going to show you in a distress indication on the chart plotter. Now, return link service, that comes back to your device to let you know that somebody has seen this, or it's gone to somebody, so it's picked up a chart. It also has near field communication for much more close proximity, which can help for man overboard recovery for people on board the boat. The advantage of this is it's got everything. So it does all the bits and pieces. It's got all the details, near field communication and mobile phones, all of that. And that it's small. It's probably only about 3 inches. It's designed to actually be mounted inside your inflatable life jacket and activate upon inflation of the jacket. So it's a semi-automatic. So when the jacket activates, if you've got it connected properly, then that starts activating in the signal. So this is really the best of all worlds from a personal protection device. So that was just where I wanted to go. But let's go now and take a look at doing a quick preliminary plan to get an idea of where we might be going. So if I take a look, if I'm in Navionics, I use Navionics a lot when I'm doing some of my main planning. So if I wanted to make a plan and say, okay, I want to go down to the Maple Bay Yacht Club. So I can sit there and say, okay, where do I want to start? So I zoom in and I go, okay, I'm going to do a route. And I could say, I want to do this automatically. All right. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not just going to put it in the start and go all the way down to Maple Bay, because on my daily planning sheet, that doesn't give me the information I need to know where are my headings, what are the directions that I need to do. So I'm going to go and say, okay, we're going to start here at, my boat's slip in Townsite Marina. And then I zoom out a little bit and say, okay, well, let's go over to here. Now, when I do that and I choose that next waypoint, over on the left-hand side, if we take a look, it says just under where it says Route 39, it shows my length is of that distance is 1 nautical mile. And my time is going to take me about 12 minutes and 10 seconds based on my boat speed that I've put into my Navionics or whatever planning tool I'm using. And I'm going to use 0.5 liters of fuel. So then it shows me what my start latitude was and what my latitude and longitude is going to be at my next stop. And it's a little bit grayed out there. So below that second latitude and longitude, it says 1 nautical mile is going to be 133 degrees and it's going to be 12 minutes and 10 seconds. So if we take a look just quickly and we go, let me find where I put that. If we look at that daily plan, so in my daily planning sheet here, if I just sort of crank this up, and one thing on the planning sheets that I've put on the website, last week somebody asked if they could be form fillable, and I thought I had posted the form fillable ones, but I realized I had redone them and hadn't built them form fillable. I will do that this week, so they will all be updated to be form fillable PDFs when we get that there. So this is where when I'm doing my daily plan and so I have my time. So if I don't know what time I'm going to be starting, my time that I put in there would be 0:00, so 0 minutes. My elapsed time would be 0 because I'm putting my initial position in. And then I put my latitude, longitude, my speed, and my distance. And then depending upon what you've got your app set for giving you the navigation, where you've got it set for giving you either true or magnetic on your headings, because you can adjust that in the settings on most of the planning tools, I would then put the appropriate heading that I would have. So then I've got my first step. So then I go, okay, well, what's my next step? I want to go out over this way. And so now that I'm waiting for the map to download, I thought this was updated. All right. So now it's telling me the next step as we go back to the iPad here for the minute. We see my next step is going to be going to 49 degrees, 10.321 minutes north, 123, etc. And it's showing me that that leg is going to be 1.5 nautical miles on a heading of 78 degrees. And it's going to take me 17 minutes and 25 seconds. But it also tells me from the very beginning, from the start that we've got 2.5 nautical miles and we've got 29 minutes and 36 seconds. And so that's where it all comes down to, and then we go, okay. And then because of the fact that we're going to need to figure out what's going on at Dodd, I put Dodd in as my next stop. And so it says my next leg going there is going to be 49 degrees, 8.233 minutes north, 123 degrees, 49.087 minutes west, going to be 3.4 nautical miles, 40 minutes and 28 seconds. And from start, it's going to be 5.9 nautical miles, about an hour and 10 minutes. So this is giving me an approximation of all my different waypoints as I go. And as I build these routes out, depending upon the app that you're using when you go through, and what type of chart plotter that you've got, Navionics has the ability to download the plots that you've done in Navionics directly onto the Axiom. Also, there was a new agreement that has just been signed with Orca. So you can do that wirelessly. So you can do all your planning through your Orca app, and then you can just click send, and it immediately shows up as one of the routes that you've got laid up on your chart plotter. Then you can simply follow that route and even automatically have it follow the route and make the turns through your autopilot. It's crazy what we can do. So this is how, rather than just simply taking and using it from start to finish, this is the best way to pull everything out and work it in stages, so that when you're doing your planning sheet and you're putting each step, you've got all of your major changes in direction. You've got all of your main latitude and longitudes. You've got all of the elapsed time that it should take you going from one checkpoint to the other. And if you don't have a chart plotter that can automatically take this planned route that you've done through your Navionics or Orca or whatever app you may be using, you can simply manually input that latitude and longitude for that next step as your next waypoint on any chart plotter. And so if you've done it all using the combination of the app and the planning sheet, it just makes it so easy to be able to navigate through. So a couple of questions that we've seen is it the convention use either degrees, minutes, and seconds, or decimal degrees, or either? I use the decimal because that's exactly what all of my instruments are going to be on board the boat. And so making sure that the latitude and longitude that I'm looking at on my instruments or when I'm doing my plots and everything is what I use, but it's your personal preference, however you want to go through it. I use the decimals because that's what my Navionics is giving me, and that's what's going to be happening on my charts as well. And so this way here, as you go through, you can build out your entire route. And the key things is when you're working through Navionics is you'll notice that as you move from one waypoint to the others, it's just easy that at each stage of the waypoint, each plot that you're putting in, you go and you just fill that in onto your planning sheet. And this is an amazing way to just spend a short bit of time perhaps the night before, where you're thinking about, well, where do we want to go tomorrow? To lay everything out, to check to see if there are any passes that you need to be concerned about, any things along the way that you need to be thinking about, figuring out what your timing is going to be, when do you need to leave, how long is it going to take you to get there. All of those things are going to come into play. Now, one of the things we took a look earlier when we talked about the current at Dodd Narrow. So we showed you how, if we're looking at Dodd, when we tap on that, let's cancel our plan. When we tap on that, we go to Dodd. This gives it our current chart down at the bottom. One of the things that is also extremely valuable is an app called Predict Current. So it's done by the same people for that do predict wind. But they have a couple of key things that can come into play when you're thinking about the impacts of currents, not just in a small channel, but on a broader basis of where you need to be concerned about. So here, we're able to put a specific location in, and it's giving me real-time data for Dodd Narrows at, the time there hasn't switched over. It's showing me for 9 o'clock there as we go. So if we go back to 8 o'clock, so if we take a look at 8 o'clock for Dodd Narrows, it's predicted that the wind is going to be going at 6 knots. That's what's up top. The current is going to be running at 4.04 knots. And, we see that the wind has all sorts of red arrows going this way, and the current has all sorts of red arrows going that way. And you're like, ooh, that could get a little funky. And then we take a look down below. We see the wave. You've got waves are going to be 2 foot at 3-second intervals, but the waves and the wind are going in the same general direction. So we're not in a wind versus waves. Several apps, particularly those that work really well out here on the West Coast. That's one of the key things is it does have warnings that says there's a wind versus wave situation. You may want to be aware of this. And then it shows us that the tide is at this point 7.7 feet in Dodd Narrows and working its way down. And so this is where we can see the different details. But where the predict current really comes into play is when we take a look at their maps. Now you can look at it in a table format, but if we go out and we're taking a look at, say we were going over to Vancouver, and we take a look at our resolution. Let's do 100 meters, tides and ocean current. What we can do is by putting our cursor, by putting our finger at any one point, it is going to show us what is the current's heading, what's the speed of the current at that particular latitude and longitude. And if I go down to the bottom, I can either just hit the play button, which is the little arrow on the far left, and it goes through the time frame as it progresses along so I can see how things are going to change. Or I could sort of take a look and say, well, hey, I'm going to want to be leaving tomorrow at, say, noon. And so I can take a look and say, well, what's it going to be like at noon tomorrow? And I can go and move my cursor anywhere, or I can simply go by what I'm looking at as far as the colors. Now, where predict current really comes into play is if we're taking a look. So let's come inside here and take a look at what we've got, in this lovely little pattern. So this is giving you a really good idea of if you're going to be heading north, you want to be on the far left side or the far right side where the currents are going to be heading north. You don't want to be in that pink spot in the middle where it's all shambly. If you're heading south, you're going to want to be in that middle part in the vineyard part. And yes, Predict Current is a paid subscription, but you can pay for it by a month basis. I think it's like $20 for a month or $40 for 3 months. So it's not something that you have to buy a whole year's worth. You can, it's like 100 and some bucks. But if you're going to be going somewhere or doing a trip, you could say, I'm just going to spend the $20 and get a month of it. But it can save you a lot of time when you're taking a look and you get a really clear picture of what's happening around a lot of these strange areas. And it allows you to pick your route a little bit better when you're going through, to be able to utilize what's happening within that current. Yes, it may be on a flood, but it's not going to be the same way on both sides of the strait as you're working your way along. So it can help you do a little bit more planning. And as always, you can always just sort of put the cursor in and you can see when things are getting ugly. Wouldn't really want to be going through here. Like, what are we looking at there? Yeah, that's getting a little red. That's running about 3 knots in there. And then you can see it gets really ugly as you sort of go down on the way to Victoria as you're working your way along. And so that's where having that can be a big piece to sort of bring things together and sort of help you get a better idea of where you go. Being an Apple person, I don't know if there's a similar one to predict current. The option might be to go with something else that has good current planning in it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll see where we go through on that side. So when we talk about, we've already showed you a couple of little things from electronic navigation options that you've got, but there's a couple of key things that we want to take a look at. Chart plotters are typically going to have their own proprietary tools, such as Raymarine has Lighthouse charts on their Axiom. Simrad uses CMAP, I believe. Many of these can also use Garmin boating, so you can add Navionics onto it as well. As far as apps that you can use on your tablets or your phone or whatever, you've got Garmin Boating, Orca, Aquamap, SavvyNavy, CMAP, OpenCPN, Wave Boating, iBoating, iNavX, Argo, etc., etc., etc. We could go on and on because there's so many different tools that are out there. You put 6 people in a room and you may have 6 different opinions as far as what's the best app to be able to use for navigation. So we're not going to get into labeling what's best or what's worst. I'm simply going to share with you what ones I use and why you might want to choose them. I use Navionics for a lot of my quick planning. So like I'm doing today, I would use that, and I used to use it almost exclusively for my on the water work as well. And I would always do my plans out in Navionics and then upload them to my Raymarine Axiom chart plotter that I have. But there's a limit to Garmin boating, and that is it really doesn't like sailboats very much. It is very powerboat focused. And Orca is one that not everybody may have seen. That is a very interesting option. Just quick, one of the comments that I'm seeing or hearing in the chat a lot is about Predict Wind being available in the Google Store, but Predict Current is not. What you may want to do is go into your Android app if you've got Predict Wind and try to get the current data, because it may pop up that you can add it to your account. I have seen that on iOS. And so there may be a way that on Android it doesn't operate as a standalone app, that it only is something that can be added in to your Predict Wind Android app. So take a look at that and maybe drop me an email and let me know if that does work. Not having Android devices, I don't see that. So Orca is an interesting monster. And we'll talk about this specifically tonight, is it can either operate as a standalone app, and if you're using the standalone app, if you don't want to have the maps being downloaded, it's free. You only have to pay the premium if you get downloading the charts. So that if you're not going to have an internet connection and you need to do that. The key thing is Orca loves sailboaters. And we'll show you the example to show you why this works. But the big key as well is Orca has a lovely little hardware device that you can mount in your boat. And it's literally a little small box about the size of if you've ever seen one of the new Mac Minis or an Apple TV, that's about what the size of it is. And when you connect that to your boat, it connects to your NMEA network and it learns everything about your boat, works your polars, and learns how you sail and will adjust everything in real time. It is pretty much amazing, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about that as you go. So the advantage of Orca is it's lovely for sailboaters. It's standalone, or you can connect it to hardware to really step the game up. Aquamap has highly detailed charts. Not quite as detailed as Garmin Boating, depending upon what you're looking for, because Garmin Boating has sonar details, which gives it more finite definition. But Aquamap is highly detailed, especially for US and Canada. And so this is the time. I did send out another email today with the information about creating your GEC account, because a number of you have not yet created your GEC account on Aquamap and sent me the email that you used to create that account. This is going to be important because we're going to be looking at Aquamap next week, and I need to send them a sheet that's got all of your names and the email address you used so that they can add the free charts and the free master account. You'll have it until the end of May. I think this is when I told them the course was ending. And so you can have that. Savvy Navvy is pretty much, it's referred to as a Google map for boats. It's got a lot of interesting features in it, but it's not free for all the formats. iNavX is great for US charts, and if you're doing with international charts, it's one of the few that you can buy and download charts for most international countries and download charts for their particular area. So it's a great tool from an international perspective with where you're going. But here's the thing. Regardless of what navigation app or charts you're using, you need to make sure you're actively subscribing, which is typically going to come at a cost, and you need to make sure that your charts are updated before you leave the dock. All right, so go in, make sure all the charts are updated, make sure everything's clear, and that also applies to your chart plotter. If your chart plotter is not always connected to the internet, you always want to make sure that those charts are being updated. If you've got a example, so you've got a Navionics subscription for your chart plotter. That's what I used to have on my Raymarine. You want to make sure that you've got all that set up as you're working your way through and that you're updated. So just briefly about the pricing. Garmin Boating, if you're just using USA and Canada, is about $80 a year to give you the updates. Navionics Plus, which gives you the additional details, including the sonar, the more detail when you're dealing with depths in tight passages, is going to be $199.95 Canadian a year. That was at Binnacle. I saw that earlier today. Orca, if you are using just the app and you want just the online charts, it's free. If you want to have the offline charts, that's going to be $219. If you buy the Orca Core, then that comes with a year of the offline charts for free, or the full premium account. The Orca Core, however, you're looking at about $800. Actually, not about, it is $800 because their pricing on their site is $798 or something, but that includes taxes, that includes shipping, includes everything. And they're a little bit back ordered because of demand, and I'm waiting for mine right at the moment. Aquamap for US and Canadian charts is $14.99 a year. The advanced tool subscription is $24.99. Those are both US pricing. But if you're a CanBoat member, CanBoat members get the year of the charts for 1124 US and a master account for 1874 US. So this is just one of the many places where being a CanBoat member can get you significant discounts, whether it's at your local chandler that's going to have a discount on all the neat little toys and bits and pieces you want, or whether it's on your software. Savvy Navvy, their basic version is free as well. So you can download the free version of it. If you go to the free Master Maximum Platinum plan, then you're looking at $189 Canadian per year for Savvy Navvy. But if you do the Nautic Ed electronic navigation course, there's codes in there where you can get a 14-day trial, but also you get a 20% discount off the premium one, which brings it down to $151.20 a year. So, we can see that from a price perspective, either the free versions of Orca or Savvy Navvy are going to be your least expensive. Then Aquamap, and remember, Aquamap has extremely detailed charts. It's one of the things that maybe Orca or Savvy Navvy doesn't come into play as we go. And keep putting the Q in front of your questions on there. I'm seeing that. We will get to some questions in just a moment. Now, how do these things differ and what might you be looking at? Now, this list is not complete. Apps are adding features all the times, and I may have missed something. But one of the features that is a standout is smart routing. Smart routing takes into account real-time weather conditions, real-time current, real-time tide data, even your boat specifications and any local regulations to say, well, this is where you want to go. And that's where, as an example, any of the sailors out there, you may have heard the term about polars, which are your particular boat is going to have polars and all of those bits and pieces where they go. Orca will actually determine what your polars are for your specific boat and your particular sailing style and go through. Some of them are going to give you priority planning for sail versus power. And I've sort of alluded to this a little bit, so I might as well sort of go and see if I can take a look and show you this one. All right, so let me just go over here back to my iPad for a second. So this is my Orca map. So if I go in and I say, I want to go from, let's do a route. I'm going to start from, where do I want to go? So I want to go from my home harbor, which is Townsite Marina, and say I want to go to Vancouver. As I put that in, and where do I want to go? I want to go to the Cole Harbor Marina. And so now, if I go here, let's go back to what you would normally get through Navionics. So if I'm doing my route planning through Navionics or another tool, it's saying, well, here you go. And here's the lovely part. If I'm doing my plan, it says it's going to take me 5 hours and 57 minutes under my engine. But I can say, I want to go Thursday at 8 a.m. So now it's going to take a look and it's going to adjust the route a little bit depending upon tides and currents and things that are there. And it shows me where am I going along the way. And I'm going to arrive at 1357 and it's going to be 35.6 nautical miles. That's what I'd have to use if I was doing any of my plan on Navionics. Well, I'm a sailboater. I want to put the sails up whenever I can. So this is where I don't need to check things out because Orca's connecting to the weather, connecting to the tides, connecting to the currents. I can say, I want to go and sail across there. So it takes a look and says, well, what's the weather going to be on that particular day? And it tells me along the way that, okay, I'm going to come out and at 8:21, if I take a look and say, I can get the weather updates over on the left. I can see what's the wind speed going to be, what's the wave height and currents going to be, what's the tides that are happening. But as I'm working my way along, it's going to tell me my wind's going to be 10 knots. It's going to be 13 knots. And you're like, well, why the heck has this got this big dog leg? because it's figuring out that the way the wind is coming from, that is going to be the best place for me to tack and be able to sort of go with the wind and be able to get there in the most efficient manner. So it's actually taking into account all of the wind shifts that are occurring. You can see the arrows. It's like 13 knots, 11 knots, 12 knots. And then as we get over, we've got a long run going, 12 knots, pretty sustained. And so we've got a nice angle on the wind, and it will, I did a test a couple of times where I did the plan with it, and I'm like, okay, it says I should be tacking here. And I'll be honest, it's a bit embarrassing to sort of say this, but I was sitting there going, man, I should be tacking now. And I was like, nope, the app says to keep going. So I kept going, and I was like, oh man, I really want to tack it. It's like, nope, app says to keep going. The app was right, and it was like, it's kind of embarrassing when, the app gave a better path of when I should be tacking. And it really allowed me to catch the wind better than what I was going to be doing. And so this is one of the strengths of the Orca app from planning. And again, even the free version will give you all of this information. It just doesn't give you offline charts. So you're still able to do the same planning as long as you're connected to the internet, to be able to pull all of that information together. It doesn't give you the capabilities to connect it to all of the electronics on board your boat. And so that's the thing that with the Orca app, you also have the ability to sort of peel things together and be making adjustments. If it sees your boat is handling a different way, it learns what sort of angle you like to sail into the wind. If you've got preferences, it gives you a logbook for the entire trip that tells you exactly what the wind was at every stage of the trip, what your heading was, what the current was. So you've got much more detail than you would always want to go. And so a couple of questions that have come up in the chat just as I'm looking at there. Can a chart plotter iPad use more than one navigational package? Absolutely. So what happens is you can have, like, when you go into, I'll use mine as far as Raymarine. In my Raymarine app, I can go in and I can say, what charts do I want to be using? So I can say, I want to use these particular charts. So I want to use this, and I can sort of choose which options that I need. As long as they're installed on the chart plotter, you choose which ones you're using on that particular day. And yes, the Orca app, Brent, I think that's what you're referring to, does integrate directly with autopilots. And it's actually got, it's an app for my Apple Watch. And so it could be cruising along on a particular heading, and it can be going, oh, it's time to tack. Do you want to tack? And I can go, yes. And then Orca takes the boat through the tack, and I just trim the sails. So it saves. All I got to do is just tap my watch, and it takes it through the turn, and I do all the sail trimming. So if I'm doing single-handed, which I do quite often, it gives me that extra tool that's there. So it does integrate specifically for that. So this is one of the big reasons on a planning step. If you are a sailboater, Orca is an amazing tool to give you that planning details that you're not going to get with any of the other apps out there. There's other benefits as well, but that's really one of the killer features of it that I sort of suggest. The other piece that you've got is over-the-horizon AIS. So if a number of you probably have AIS on board your vessel, which gives you all the vessel information on your chart plotter. There's options that you've got in various tools that you can pay premiums to get over the horizon AIS, because AIS is only going to give you the same sort of horizontal distance, same as you're going to get from the VHF, because it can't see things further away. What AIS does is when you go there, it gives you the ability to use the satellite communication from other boats that have sent their AIS details up to the satellite, and it will tell you whether that AIS signal is coming from a satellite signal or whether it's coming from your boat. There's a really good review tutorial of Orca that's on the site that I created a link to from a guy's sailboat down in Grenada that's had it for a year. And it really talks well about that side of things. Savvy Navvy has this option as well. Predict Wind Data Hub has that option. A lot of them will connect and give you current marine weather forecasts, including current, including weather, wind, all of that stuff. Savvy Navvy has that. Orca has that as well. A lot of them will give you departure time planning that you can sort of say, I want to go from here to there. And it'll sort of look at the wind and weather patterns and say, you know what? If you left at 10:30, that's going to be your most efficient time because of all the currents and going and where all that does. And yes, Orca does give current flow information, a little bit differently, but it does have all of that in the weather aspect with it. Some of them will connect to onboard instruments such as Orca, Savvy Navvy, Aquamap. They'll connect and bring the readings. Some of them you can have your route and your current location automatically uploaded to the internet, so you can just share that with your friends. A lot of them have that so that they can track and follow you. It's also great if you're single-handing so that people know where you are as you're going. And there's all sorts of them that have community updates. So this is where when you're dealing with things, Garmin has that with their active captain app to bring information as that comes together. So Savvy Navvy, as you know, you've got the free level account that goes through. The essential account is $99 Canadian, and that gives you over the horizon AIS up to 3 nautical miles, 4-day trip planning, marine and anchorage information, automatic course to steer, automated weather and tidal routings. As you go up to the Explorer one, you also get your tidal hearts graph. You get the offline charts and weather. You can send the route to the chart plotter and the departure schedule planner. And if you go up to the Elite one, that's the one, remember, that's got the 20% discount with Nautic Ed. That gives you your tidal streams atlas, the ECWMF mixed weather forecasting, satellite mode, anchor alarms, connects to your NMEA, so it brings everything in and gives you unlimited over the horizon AIS capabilities in there as well. Now, the two that we're taking a look at, just to sort of, we'll go in and explore a little bit, is Garmin and Orca. Those are the two that we wanted to focus on tonight in the last half hour and show you a couple things. But I just want to talk about the Orca and the Orca Core, just to sort of give you a couple of insights with this. So Orca is both an ecosystem, if you will, as well as a standalone app. Now, it's built from the ground up. So it's their charts are getting better. They don't put as much data as the Navionics charts have or that Aquamap's charts have. Some people say that it's less cluttered, so it's easier to see with what you've got going on. I still use my Navionics as a alternative and in my planning stages, but Orca has been my main planning tool. And as I mentioned, I have ordered the Orca Core, which is that little white box that you see on this picture on the left-hand side, where you got the blue Apple Watch, an iPhone, an iPad, and then the Orca Core. That gives you an idea. It's about twice the width of an iPhone. And it has its own built-in GPS that if you've got a fiberglass boat like a sailboat, you can map that out on the inside. So you can mount it on the inside if you've just got the fiberglass above. Obviously, if it's outside, it's better, but you don't have to. It can be inside. Facing upright's better. It's got amazing mounting tools that's there. It will connect and do radar overlay as well. So on your actual app and chart. And the key thing with it is it's broadcasting to phones and tablets, as well as potentially your chart plotter, depending upon what you've got, and integrating with all of your electronics. So just want to go here for a second. So if we take a look, the Core 2, when we think about that, it allows you to use a tablet or a phone, and if you've got it connected, it's getting all of the instrumentation, and you can build out your navigation screens as you want for whatever particular event that you're using. You can change all of the different layouts. So it's like a really elaborate chart plotter with the way that it's set up. It is accurate with its built-in GPS to 1.5 meters. Its compass accuracy is 1.5 degrees. But here's where it gets really cool. And this is one of the things that I'm quite interested in, is it's recording everything in an electronic logbook. And so at the end of your route, you're able to see exactly where you went on that entire route, which a lot of the chart plotters do. But this is actually going to give you all of your sailing performance at each step along the way. Again, it said this is really key for sailboaters. It's going to tell you how your efficiency is with the polars. It's going to tell you what the current was, what the wind speed was. As an example here, it's showing you this was your speed and distance that you were doing at what time, what was the speed, your wind speed and direction. So it's showing you how things were changing. Your polar performance, so this is where it's saying, well, the boat says you should have been doing this, but you were doing 103% of that. You were averaging 82%. And so it really gives you all of that detail in your logbook that lays everything out that you can then download or simply have archived. It connects to your autopilot so that it takes care of the turns. While you go through, either on your watch or your phone, it says, hey, you're going to go 90 degrees to starboard in 12 minutes. You want to do that? And you go, yep, we're good to go. And then you go, and it connects to all your autopilots. And of course, you've got your anchor alarm and real-time monitoring, as well as being able to connect your radar onto it as well to see the details and everything as you're working your way through. So it does have a lot of cool things. Now, one of the things to remember is you don't need to have a Core 2 to use the Orca app for your planning. Again, it's free. If you don't want to do that, if you don't need to have any of that and you don't want to have off charts, they do sell it's not very expensive. It's about $1,400, a display that is designed to sort of be a big waterproof iPad, but it's Android based. So for me, being somebody that lives within the Apple ecosystem, with everything that's there, I just use my iPad. I've got a 12-inch iPad Pro with a waterproof housing on it. It's got all of my stuff and bits and pieces, and it looks identical to it. Maybe not quite as bright in sunlight as the Display 2 is, but it really allows you to sort of, if you want to go there and have a dedicated app, but if you've got an iPad or an Android tablet, it will work just as well with that. I believe the Orca app does work on Android. I'm not 100% certain. Would need to sort of take a quick look at that. So that's one of the things. While we're here on the website, just want to I did send an email out because there were several of you that had reached out that said, oh, I don't know how to connect to get the handouts. I don't know how to do that. We had sent that information out in the initial welcome email. Apologies for not sending it out again. But we did send the link and the password to everybody again this evening. And so this is where we see the stuff from the last session, the live session link. And remember, the live session links, if you go back to it, it will also take you to the recording. So it's the same sort of link that you've got. Depending upon when you looked, there's a few more things that have been added to tonight and a few more that I will be adding in. The handouts are there. Links to the different software websites. So Garmin Boating, Orca, Savvy Navvy, and Aquamap. The Orca manual, you can download that, as well as several playlists that have some really good either reviews or tutorials for Orca, the Aquamap, Savvy Navvy, or Garmin boating. Some of these are from the platforms themselves. Others are external videos or other pieces that come into play. So let's go back and take a look at a couple of things with regards to Navionics or Aquamap, Orca, as we're taking a look. So if we take a look as we're going through, one of the big things is that over on the left-hand side, if you take a look at the different chart layers. So this is where right now I've got the nautical chart set up. And if we click the sonar chart and we zoom in to a particular area, it's going to give you a lot more detail that is typically reserved for much more commercial vessels. We just had a confirmation in the chat that Orca does work on Android. Okay, that's good news. Thank you for that. Appreciate doing that. Most people are going to just use the nautical chart, but depending upon how concerned you are in a particularly tight passage, you may want to go to that sonar chart. So that's where the chart layers options that you've got. As far as overlays, you can add satellite imagery onto the overlay. You can take a look at relief shading or add the sonar imagery onto it as an overlay, or just go to no overlay and go to the nautical charts. Depending upon what your particular proclivities are, how you like to navigate around, you can either have a north up orientation, a heads up orientation, or a course up orientation. Here it's showing you where I live right now. You can choose to go automatic on the colors so that based on nighttime, it's going to switch to a nighttime screen. And the Orca app has amazing nighttime coloring. I love their layouts as far as their description. The one big thing that's going to be really important is that before you leave the dock, remember, you want to make sure that you're checking that your apps are up to date or your maps are up to date. And so this is where when you go in and you click on the AIS settings, or sorry, not the AIS settings, on update maps, then it's going to go through and check for updates on the maps and let you know if there's any updates that need to be done. You want to make sure you do that before you leave the dock while you've still got all of that connection and all of those details that are there. So it's going through because we've got the bandwidth being used on the live stream. It may be sort of struggling a little bit on that. They were all updated. But the other thing that you may want to do as you're going through is if you need to download additional apps, you would just simply zoom out until you've got the area that you want to have covered. And we don't need to go to the US right now. So say we wanted to go up here and I've got that. I could say I want to download those. And if it doesn't have them, we can see down there on the bottom that it's still working on that as it's going. Yeah, Stuart, the sailing on the Orca app is a free item, I believe. And it just, as long as you're not downloading the maps, it's just, if you download the Orca app, that's all you need to be able to get those sorts of details on. So it can be a nice little, if you're already subscribing to, say, Navionics as an option, using the free version of the Orca before you go to get some prediction or while you have internet connection, or in my case, I've got a Starlink that I've got up. So I always have internet if I need it as we're working way along. So when you go back to your settings there, this is where you can choose Easy View, which is going to magnify the icons and the text if you're getting a little bit older and need reading glasses or things that you've got. And this is where under the AIS settings, where it says, what do you want to have if you're displaying AIS on your Navionics? What is the vector length? So that vector length is going to be when there's a vessel that's showing up on your Navionics, and almost every planning app is going to have these options where you can choose to set how long of an arrow or a line do you want extending from the front of that vessel, and where do you want that end of the line to be. So I could sort of say, I want to set that for 10 minutes. And what that means is that when there's an AIS vessel showing up on my Navionics, I know that the end of that line in front of it is where that boat's going to be in 10 minutes. And so that gives you the ability to sort of see a little bit more in planning where are you going to be in relation to another vessel that's coming up. You can also, in your AIS settings, choose a safe range. So how close am I willing to come to another vessel? And, you know, what's the time to intersect I want to know about? So when I'm going to start getting warnings, I've got mine set to 500 feet on the safe range and time to intersect at 5 minutes. That's just my particular preference that I've got there. There is an option that is Sonar Chart Live and does water level correction, and you've got dive settings. So what this is using, and there's been a couple of questions about the Sonar Chart aspects that's coming through. And so what it says within Navionics is that the bathymetric map created in real time using sonar data that is streamed through connected compatible Wi-Fi devices. And there's a link there that you can click to learn more about that. This is where it says, what are you going to do as far as water level? What do you want to indicate as far as a shallow area? Where do you want your depth shading, your depth contours, all of those things? Do you want to map out seabed areas, the active captain stuff? So all of these parts are going to give you the key details on the options that you're going to have on your maps. And so when you're thinking about that, when you're putting all that together, that's going to be a valuable tool when you're working on things as you're working your way along. Now, if we zoom in here and take a look and say, okay, well, let's put ourselves here, you know, didn't want to do that. All right, so as you go, if you haven't used this before, over on the right-hand side, it's giving you a scale. Let me get off the daytime here, go to day or get off nighttime. On the bottom right-hand side, what we see is it's showing you a scale for what that distance is going to be. And if I'm doing a plan, if I want to go and sort of see, well, how far is that? If I click on the virtual calipers down on the right-hand side, I can then simply move those 2 points, and it's going to give me what the distance and the bearing is between those 2 points. So pretty much what you would do with a paper chart using calipers and a protractor, or, you know, what some other little planning tool. So most of the apps are going to have some form of electronic caliper system that is incorporated in to be able to help you sort of get that. So if we're just trying to sort of say, okay, well, how far is it from that? So it's going to be 0.9 nautical miles on a heading of a bearing of 268 degrees as you're working your way along. And all of these are great tools to help you sort of get a good feel for where you're going. What are the details that you want? And they do have, when you get to where there's a marina, there'll be a marina, and this is the Coho Cove Yacht Club. And so it's going to give you the marina information. And in some cases, they may give you a phone number. So if we zip down here to say, for example, let's go right down. If we take a look at go to Maple Bay, we see Maple Bay Marina. It's going to bring up your details on the left-hand side, which gives you a summary, tells you when it was last updated, their address, their contact information. what VHF channel that they monitor, is it open to the public, what's their season, and all the different amenities that they've got. So those are all just automatically built in to the Navionics app, and many of the other maps that you've got are going to give you that type of information so that you can see what you have. So this is where it's talking about, what do you have? Do they have fuel? And this is one of the ones that I find is very valuable. It tells you what's the depth at the fuel dock. All right. So where you're getting your fuel, how much water are you going to have beneath the keel? Because there's some places it's not exactly a lot. And so you get to sort of wonder a little bit. So it does give you a lot of the details on the different marinas that you may have, as well as you may have information with regards to anchorage. That's there. You simply click on it and then go up to the details, and it will give you some information about the anchorage. Now, bear in mind that it's more than just the information that you've got in here. That if we take a look, let's go back to this one. All right. So if we're taking a look at doing a plan, and we were looking at Dod Narrows, we can look at local guidebooks. So this is the Salish Sea Pilot Guide. This is that goes through the different marinas, gives you all the different locations that you've got. And it really is. So if we go back to the beginning, they used to have several guides, and now it's all integrated into a single guide for 2026. And so if we take a look at the main chart, so as we're going, we say, I'm going to be going into the Gulf Islands. And so if I click on Gulf Islands and I go, well, where am I going to go? Well, maybe I'm going to go down to Bouchard Gardens. So I'm going to click on Saanich Inlet, and then I go, where am I going to bay? Well, maybe I'm going to go to Todd Inlet. Maybe I want to go to Bouchard Gardens. So I want to go watch the fireworks this summer. So I can click on Todd Inlet. It shows me all the details, shows me where the stern ties are, shows me where the mooring balls are, where the anchorages are, and gives me all the particular details for that particular location. Same thing that you're going to get out of other navigation guides. The one thing I like about the Salish Sea Pilot series for my personal usage is they do provide an extremely discounted price for updating when they come out with a new version every year. And so you get all of the current details, and they do have lots of really good blow up sections. So here we can say, okay, well, if I'm going to be at Brentwood Bay, it'll take me and show me there. It's like, well, if I'm going to the public wharf at Brentwood Bay, so I can zoom right in and see very specific details. And there's descriptions about where am I going to go for supermarket, where can I get groceries, what are my options for pump outs, etc. And it's always updated. And so, the ability to get a updated version each year is very valuable from that perspective. But remember, we're required to have the, documents from the federal government as well. And so this is where, if we take a look at the sailing directions, this is PAC 201, Juan de Fuca Strait and the Strait of Georgia. And so this is where, remember that sailing directions are going to show you all of the things that that the government feels you need to know about a particular area that they can't fit onto the charts. And so if we take a look at Dod Narrows, we see that there's a fair bit there. It says Dod Narrows is separated from False Narrows by Mudge Island. It's not recommended for passage of larger craft. However, vessels up to 70 meters have gone through. It's slack water. Narrows are quite short. Goes through, gives you pictures about what it's going to look like. Talks about different facilities. Oops, we flip back there. And there we go. That's what I want. And so as we go through, you can find all the particular areas. And, if you haven't looked at sailing directions, even for places where you may routinely go, it's amazing the amount of detail that there's things that you may not have realized, like particular places where, anchorages could be a bit of an issue because of certain things on the bottom that they're mentioning. So always make sure that you take a look at the information within sailing directions when you're going to be going through anything that's particularly a new area where you may be taking a look at. All right, so cognizant of the time, what I want to do is I want to flip and deal with some questions right now. We'll take a look a little bit more at Orca, next week when we look at Aquamaps and Savvy Navvy, as we go. So let's go and take a look at what we've had here. So I'm going to be working my way back. And so as we go, sonar ones we've answered, we had a comment here. Does Orca give current flow information? So this is where all the weather integration, it has the current data, the tide data. You can get that by simply clicking on the weather option, and it will show you all of that information on the left-hand side within the Orca app. We can take a look at that. And as we go, Brent made a comment. I'm not sure what this was referring to, Brett, about holy shizzles. It takes the effort out of circumnavigation efforts. Not sure which app that was, but yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, it's one of the things if you have the premium version of Predict Wind, if you're doing any offshore work, the planning on that is pretty extreme. Like you can put in and you can say that I'm going from here to Tahiti. And you can say, I want to spend no more than 30% of my time on a beam reach, and put all of those details in. And you simply press a button and it will go and do all the scanning and say, you should leave at 2:00 on Thursday. And then every day when it updates with all the weather information, it readjusts things and say, oh, you want to keep heading down this way, taking into account all of the wind situations, the current, and all of those key details. And so, yeah, it's amazing the amount of data that we actually have the access to. And so, yeah, there was a question earlier about, can a chart plotter iPad use more than one navigational software package? I probably have about 7 of them on my iPad, both because I use it for teaching, but also because there's certain times, I may use one or the other. But yeah, I've got Aquamap, I've got Navionics, I've got Savvy Navvy, I've got Orca, and depending upon what I'm doing on any particular day, I will use more than one of those as I'm working my way along. Do I use Active Captain on my Garmin? If so, what are my thoughts? I have used Active Captain. Generally not so much as for my particular areas where I'm going to be and utilizing as far as coming into play. And there were a couple of things talking about adding the upgrade on Predict Wind to include currents is a $69 upgrade to add the current aspect. I believe that was probably on the Android component that it was taking a look at. That was there. So thank you for that, Lindsay. It's a little bit hard when I'm dealing with the broadcasting to be able to start scanning the internet and find details that are there as well. All right. So yeah, looks like I think I got a lot of them that are going there. And it's like, oh yeah, there's a few comments here about, heard some great arguments on the radio of people going through Dodd. Yeah, and by the way, there's no S, it's just Dodd. It's Dodd Narrows as opposed to Dodd's Narrows. No offense, but just, little nuances as far as things there. And there were a couple of questions back. We were talking about radios there. I think there was a question about using it for kayaking, and yeah, if you get an MI number, and that's where the key is that when you're getting a radio, if you're getting a handheld radio, make sure it's a DSC version. I believe you can still buy handheld radios that are not DSC. The DSC versions on the handheld radios have a built-in GPS. So it's got your latitude, longitude, all those details there. So if anywhere, it's got all of that information contained directly on your handheld radio, and you can hit the emergency button and it gives the exact location and everything that's there. So if you don't have a DSC radio on board your vessel, this would be one of the first things that I would, consider being, let's upgrade that, because it makes such a difference in being able to get that direct information. Without it, you're limited to the VHF on your radio and what are the details there, as opposed to I can just press and hold a button for 5 seconds and it sends out the warning and says, okay, Lyle's, latitude attitude's in distress and this is where it's located. Again, what we're trying to do is to take search and rescue and just make it about rescue. That's key. There were a couple of questions that were talking about the service for meteorologists. I don't know about other regions in Canada. They may, and I'm assuming they might, particularly around the Great Lakes area. It would probably be something there, but that would be something to check. You might even be able to call the BC number and they may be able to let you know if you can't locate that. Obviously, this session is all focused on passage planning for BC waters, so I haven't researched the rest of Canada because my boat's not leaving, going to the other parts of Canada. It's staying in the water on this end. And somebody asked about my boat in there. I'm not sure what that was. It's a 38-foot overall. It's a Beneteau, 2006. Other than that, as we're taking a look, I think I got most of them. Is like, oh yeah, the comments that metal frame cockpit chairs can move the compass needle too. Absolutely. Any metal, any electronic device. So you always have to check and watch that when you're doing your deviation card and when you're using your binnacle compass that is there as we're working our way along. Let's see. All right. All right. So we had a question here about sailing directions. The most recent Fernley sailing directions is probably about 3 months old. They're updated at least every year. So if you follow the link that we've got on the website, there's a link. If we just go back, let me just flip over to that for a second quick here. So on the March 9th handouts, there's the 2006 Canadian boating documents. If you click on that, then that will take you to a sheet that I've compiled that we've put together. And when you look at that, you'll see here, it's got the links for the 2026 tides and currents tables, the tidal currents, and you see here sailing directions was either March of 2025. That's not 11/2026. That's probably that's an incorrect date. Apologies for that one because we haven't hit November 2026 yet. Discovery Passage in West Coast Vancouver is December 2025, November 2025. So that's probably 11/2025 as well. Or actually, I think there was an update on that in February. So that may be 2026-01 or 02. Yeah, 01. That's why it's the one. And so the one for Juan de Fuca Strait and Strait of Georgia was updated in January of 2026. So this is where, remember, you're legally obligated to have the most current version of the Canadian sailing directions on board your vessel. So electronic, and it is downloadable for free, as well as all your notice to mariners and stuff like that from there. So absolutely. Let's go back to... Oh, no, that's what I want. I want to go... Sorry about that one. I didn't program this one in. So let us know what iPad cover you have. I bought it a few years ago. I will get that information figured out and I will post it onto the site. It's an Armor X, I believe. It's an amazing waterproof one. It's got a really good mounting bracket that I can mount on the binnacle. So if my chart plotter electronic goes out, I can just clamp my iPad right there and I'm on the go. We had a question about how accurate are the tides and currents information on Orca. They are generally very good. I'm going to be putting it through the test more so this summer. As I mentioned, I've just ordered the Orca core and I'm hoping it's going to get here before we're back out on the water at the end of the month, and be able to sort of start providing some more detailed information as we go. There was a question, Steve, you said, are you able to demonstrate how the auto currents and depth features work on Orca and Navionics? As far as for showing that, what we'll do is, cognizant that we're at 9 o'clock, we will start with that next week. We'll take a look at that and we'll be able to show that also within Aquamaps as well as we're taking a look at that information. So that's where our time is, and I'm very cognizant of trying to make sure that we don't take up too much of your time and we bring all that information together. As I mentioned, we will be trying to do some more tutorials and pop some more information online for you. For those of you that have not yet sent me the Aquamap login, please follow the directions. Again, this is only if you want to have access to a master Aquamap account and the US and Canada charts all the way until the end of May. To be able to be playing with. Remember that as a CanBoat member, if you're a member of CanBoat, you do get the discount on that. So it works out to be like $30 US for the master app and the US charts for a year. So even at the crazy exchange rates, that's still better than any of the other options that are there. So it is an interesting alternative. So that's where we've got for this evening. If you have any last minute comments and stuff, please feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll take a quick look at those and try to respond to things, as well as if you do have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out and let us know. There's lots of ways to be able to get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to respond to questions. If there are any questions that you've asked and I haven't gotten back to you, it's been an extremely busy week. As I mentioned, I was getting the boat out because of the weather that's going to be coming, but I will get through and get to them. Otherwise, reach out to me again and I will pop those questions in. So thanks very much again, everybody, for joining us for night number 2. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at a lot more of the integration of the different apps, whether it's Predict Wind, Predict Current, Windy. We're going to be taking a look at Aquamap and see how it compares. And what we'll do is we'll set up a couple of specific planning exercises and go through and do it with Savvy Navvy, Aquamap, Orca, and Navionics, so we can see what some of the differences might be with regards to that information as we're planning our way through. All right. Awesome, everybody. Thanks very much for the time. And there we go. So if you do have any other questions, we had one last question there. What do you do when the electronics are not possible? Well, that's why we do all of our backups and why night number 4 is going to be taking a look at going old school and using the paper and bringing it all together. So thanks very much, everybody. Have yourself a great evening and a great week. And hopefully we'll see you next Monday night as we take a look and explore some of the additional electronic planning apps that we've got. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you spending the time with us tonight.